You are now in the backcourt for episode 8, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. I am one of your hosts, Lucas Kaplan of Nets Film Focus. I write for NetsDaily. You can find all my written words there. And alongside me, as always, is Sarah Kustok, voice, I guess not voice of the Nets, that title belongs to Chris Carino, but certainly a voice of the Brooklyn Nets, color commentator for Yes Network. Sarah, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Lucas, we've got the rare stretch of a lot of days. I don't know if we really have off days, but off days from Nets games. That this has been a different feel with the Cup games taking place and just the way the Brooklyn schedule is shaken out.
Yep, for this opening, these two, three first weeks in December, the Nets are playing about, what, 2 games a week, and they're practicing just as much, which is unheard of in the modern
Yeah,
NBA. I think after the All-Star break last season, what did they have? One, two practices, if that?
exactly.
Just to recap, our listeners, since the last time we recorded, the Nets played 2 home games at the Barclays Center, split them. They defeated the Indiana Pacers in a close, exciting game on Wednesday, and then they narrowly lost to the Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday. Another close, exciting game, definitely a different type of game, and that's where we're at right now. The Nets are 10 and 14. The Nets also hosted plenty of community events this week. I just want to shout those out. Zaire
Yeah.
Williams was out giving toys to Toys for Tots, just in the community, giving out toys for this holiday season. Saw Day'Ron Sharpe at Target across the street from Barclays Center. He took a bunch of local youth shopping. And then Cam Thomas, Tyrese Martin, Trendon Watford. Nets tweeted out some photos of them playing games at Dave and Buster's, right, with all more youth from the community. I think 35 kids in total. It was just a really nice start to this holiday season, in addition to the basketball. Sarah, who do you think on this Brooklyn Nets team would be really good at arcade games?
Oh, that's a good question. I it, I would I would suggest a lot of them. I feel like arcade games, it takes a lot of hand-eye coordination.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
I do you have a guess? I feel like I mean, I don't know why I naturally think Dayron, and I don't know why I would suggest that. He just seems playful and fun, and yeah. But if you have better thoughts,
No, that's where I was going. It was interesting to follow Dayron around as he took all the kids shopping at Target, and we were talking about, all these kids want electronics now. Dayron went right to the board game section, so I think that illustrates your point.
oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
I
no, I
like it.
think a
I
playful
like it.
guy.
I love a board game. I love a good board game.
And by the way, that's a good transition into one of our first topics, talking about the on-court, the basketball that was played in this last week. Dayron is officially back. He debuted against the Chicago Bulls, and we talked about that a week ago. But now he has 3 games under his belt. He's firmly, as you would expect, in the rotation, getting minutes. So just what have you seen from Dayron this now that he's really, cemented himself back in the rotation?
I think it's just great to see him back on the floor, and I think the totality of it, and I know we'll get into all of it, but having Dorian Finney-Smith back, Nic Claxton back in a setting that you've got him, Ben Simmons, like the size is apparent that has been lacking for Brooklyn, and I think it circles back to give them a ton of credit for how they've plugged holes and just it really has been a next man up mentality, but now it's great to see. And for Dayron in particular too, I think like he's done a nice job of getting his legs under him quickly, working the timing. We know that he's great on the offensive glass, but I think overall too, even some of those pick and roll plays or the consistency that he has, whether it's Dennis Schroeder, you go down the list of a handful of players that have been finding him. I think it's been fun to watch because he did have a great offseason and preseason. The expectations for what he may be here in this fourth year is something that I think at this point now of the season will be fun to watch him then get a stretch, hopefully, of being healthy and being integrated back into the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, his second to third year leap was tremendous when we were talking about him last season. And I think you're seeing already some of the things that made him, such an impressive player last season. Right now, not to get too granular, but Jordy Fernandez, they're playing some aggressive pick and roll coverages. I mentioned it last week. Day'Ron's having to switch, 30 feet from the basket or hedge and recover.
Yes.
And that mobility, the way he can cover ground, that was definitely a question over his first 2 years, I think, as with any young big. And he answered them tremendously last year. And so far this season, he's looking great, just moving around on the court, covering his bases. I assume, that's what you're seeing when you're sitting right up close.
Yeah, and Lucas too, that's so important to say in talking about the defensive side and the ability to
Hmm.
play in the schemes that Jordi Fernandez is asking in terms of pressure, in terms of what they're doing in their pick and roll coverage. Because he's a player we saw throughout the course of coming in as a rookie and then the subsequent years of really working on his body and
Yeah.
leaning out and figuring out what it takes in a lot of regards to be a professional, be a true pro. And I think he poured a lot of time and a lot of effort into that. And that's tough when it's the early part of the preseason. You probably feel like you're in your best shape, you're ready to continue to peak, and then you have an injury that's a lower body injury of which you can't then continue to
Hmm.
condition or
Hmm.
work in the same way. So that's why I do think it'll still be a work in progress. And can be frustrating. I mean, you could say this for a lot of players. I know it feels like at some point has dealt with that throughout the course of the season for Brooklyn. But I think that will allow him as the games continue on and these practice times and as the weeks go on, I think we're even going to continue to see a better and better version of him.
That's a really good point because it's not like he was out with a wrist or a finger or
Right.
anything like that. He was out with a hamstring strain, about 2 months, made his debut, and the fact that he, still looks as he looked last season, maybe even getting better in terms of
Right.
mobility, athleticism, all of that, that's really encouraging and lets you know that that physical transformation is and was real. The rest will come along. I think I wrote it the other day. He's only taken 7 layups so far. Like it's such a small sample size. He's made 3 of them. We'll get more comfortable, finish around the basket. Just the stuff that comes back to you as you get your rhythm and
Yes.
flow under you.
Yes.
As Sarah mentioned, Dorian Finney-Smith had missed 6 of 7 games. He's now returned from an ankle sprain. Noah Clowney is officially healthy, set to return from an ankle sprain. But just wanted to pour some love on Day'Ron Sharpe since it was his season debut. He missed all of these first 2 months of the season with that hamstring strain. Uh, Quick shout out there. Now we'll get into the more general stuff. I think we have to start with Jordi Fernandez had some words to say about his team. After they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, they lost 117-112, I believe, and they gave up 67 points in the second half, and he called their effort into question. Not so much their effort, but just said it's unacceptable, and we got to be better on defense. And personally, watching it, I kind of felt like they certainly had some things they could have done better in that Milwaukee loss, but like Gary Trent Jr. made some tough shots. Bobby Portis was like turning into prime Klay Thompson from above the break. So I guess did you kind of see where he was coming from?
I agree with you, and I think the thing you love about Jordi Fernandez is that he is always honest. He's always straightforward. What he says to the media, he has said to the players.
Yeah.
And I think what jumped out to me most about that post game press conference is that he always is the first to take accountability. So the first part of that was him saying, "My bad. I decided to double Giannis." That opened up to your point of
Mm-hmm.
like Gary Trent
Mm-hmm.
Jr., Bobby Portis, 3-point shooters. And that was my mistake. However, turning to the effort, the way things looked the end of the third quarter, the obviously close of the game, I think that's all a balance of it. I did not feel there's certain times and certain stretches you feel that. I do think it was the nuance of the game. And you see this often. I mean, I think you talk about Giannis being one of those players. Joel Embiid is another one. I remember, for as much as the Nets have played them, or at least a handful of times in the
Mm-hmm.
postseason, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
questions. Okay, how are you going to handle this? Adjustments you make based on game by game situations. Do you double a player like Giannis? What does that do to open up the rest of the teammates that he has that he can facilitate for? And I don't know if there's always seemingly a right answer. And the thing is, in that circumstance, you look at this Milwaukee team, Bobby Portis had not been shooting the three ball well. He had been struggling throughout the duration of the season. He's a player that has shown in his career that he can get hot. I think whatever his career average, 37, 38% from three, but he was well below that. Gary Trent Jr.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
has been better, but he initially was in the starting lineup. His shot had not been
Yeah.
what it was in the early part of the year. He's been so I think you look at a handful of players from Milwaukee that had not been as efficient as then they were that night. And I think that's where it's the give and take of, sometimes that happens because those players do have those capabilities. That
Yep.
Milwaukee team, despite coming off of two straight losses, has been playing a lot better.
Yep.
And it's a part of the game. I think though just the disappointing finish is that they
Right.
played to me I thought they played so well and they did the little things and the consistency of what we talk about in chemistry and playing for one another and everyone contributing in some capacity. I thought you saw that. I thought Milwaukee just hit some really timely shots, and it
Hmm.
felt like every time the Nets went on a run or started to open things up, they were able to respond. I think more than anything, anytime you have a late lead, that's where at home, that's
Yeah.
where it becomes disappointing.
Yeah. And it we said this off camera, but it's the first time in a while that the Nets have played what felt like a complete game and stuck to their principles and made a lot of shots
Yes.
and still lost. Which is a credit to them because you're not going to win every single one of those games. The NBA is full of good teams, but probably the first time a loss has felt like that maybe since that early loss to Denver at home. A missed free throw and they went to overtime, but that's a credit to Jordy Fernandez and his staff right there, and obviously the players that they haven't really had a loss like that in a while. I will say, everyone talks about with these great superstars, oh, do you want to make them a score? Do you want to, let everybody else get
Yeah.
theirs and then limit that guy? And that's a lot easier said than done. And sometimes you look up and it's like, yeah, Giannis is over 30 points and Gary Trent's over 20 and Bobby Portis and the role players. So that is a lot easier said than done. And man, Gary Trent wasn't just making open threes, man. He was hitting like
Yes.
fade away, 16
Yes.
footers off one leg. And credit to them, man. NBA players can make shots.
And I think too, real quick to finish that off, that's a Milwaukee team that Chris Middleton was back, had a
Right.
game under his back. He was hitting shots too that looked like
Yep.
he was back in his comfort zone in some ways. That I think you've got to remember, this is a team that is expected to compete for a championship and whatever that looks like and however they've bared it out. But they had their full complements of a roster of players that had come in and believed that they were getting themselves back on track. And I think you saw a lot of that.
Definitely. Credit to Milwaukee. In the first Nets Bucks game, the Nets pulled away in the third quarter after the Bucks hit a punch, and then the Bucks just kind of folded. The Nets won that game by 20.
Right.
This game, Nets go up by 12 in the third quarter. Bucks a lot more resiliency, and you got to give them credit there. Um, the but both games didn't go like that. The Nets did win against the Indiana Pacers, and they did close with defense. And I think after they closed that game so strong on defense and really played an awesome defensive game,
Yes.
except for the third quarter, it shows you that attention to detail, like executing the game plan. I think that's a lot of what Jordy's talking about. It's not just, oh, we didn't dive on the floor and oh, we didn't hustle to the corner. It's,
Yes.
the mental awareness, the mental sharpness of it too is a part of that effort. But we can talk about that Indiana win because they did hold Indiana to 90 points. And 35 of them came in the third quarter. But man, the Nets really gutted out that win. What did you see, from that game?
You said it, gutting it out. I also think the fun part of all this that we're talking about, the bar has been raised. The
Definitely.
bar of expectation. It's not just play hard, compete, pressure, try and disrupt an offense. It is about game plan discipline and the execution of the smallest things on a closeout, on the rotations. And so to me, that's where, and I understand, coaches look at things in a different way or a different capacity, or obviously, I think the entirety of that Nets team with the loss to Milwaukee felt like they had that game and they should have won
Yeah.
that game. And I get that. But that's where each and every night you expect this team to be in it and to compete. And I think they showed that with the Pacers win. I also think their composure and poise down the stretch was showcased just in how again they were able to find shots for one another. I think just the different players coming in and the ways in which they were able to contribute. But I do think so much of it was on the defensive side because you look at Indiana, and again, they're underperforming based on preseason expectations or what you, but they're a scoring team. They're a
Hmm.
team that can put
Hmm.
up points. They have players that have a lot of offensive firepower, and the Nets kept them at bay and when it was very necessary. And so I thought that win in and of itself was a great, not only feel good win, but one in which you can be very pleased with the execution, in particular down the stretch.
And the cool thing about that was it was a bench unit that has not played a lot of time together that closed that game out. And so we've talked on this show a lot about the
Yes.
Nets being small this season. All of a sudden, they're looking healthy, and the rotation includes Dorian Finney-Smith, Nic Claxton, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharpe, Trenton Watford, Ben Simmons. That's like six forward slash center type dudes.
And Lucas, think about to that point when I'm talking about the bigs that are there. I forgot even to mention Noah Clowney because he was available, as you mentioned, coming back from
Hmm.
injury, but he was a coach's decision DNP because they're now starting to get some of that depth that you didn't
Yeah.
see, and that's where I think it'll give decisions and decision making in terms of combinations. But I think that's the exciting part. It's like, okay, now you have a lot more options to look at as opposed to maybe some of those more depleted lineups or rotations that you were dealing with early on because of injury.
And that's going to force Jordy's hand. And he said in the preseason, I want that part of my job to be hard. That means that the guys are doing their job and performing. And to that point, the Trendon, Day'Ron, Ben Simmons front court was awesome against Indiana. I know it
Awesome.
sounds a little funky on paper, but they were switching at the point of attack. They were all covering ground on defense. Ben Simmons had like two steals, two blocks. Day'Ron was like switching on to TJ McConnell. It was great, and they mucked things up, and then they got out and ran, and it was exactly how it's supposed to look. And then against Milwaukee, that unit did not perform as well. I think they had a little bit of a tougher time guarding space, and then, you know, Milwaukee was hitting tough shots. They had to take the ball out of the basket. That limited kind of what Brooklyn could do in transition. So that bench unit, and now that Brooklyn is big, much bigger than they were the first 5, 6 episodes we did this show, they're going to have a lot of things to work through just with that bench unit and what combinations they go to, and they're gonna be a funky team moving forward. And I don't say that as a slight.
No, and I think when you even mentioned that, that's a great point about what that felt like during it. There's certain juice or energy that different players bring at different
Hmm.
moments, and I
Hmm.
think how they fit together. And to me, it's very visible throughout different courses of the game. It's not always the same thing, and that's why I think it's fun. Just as we continue to watch these players, understanding just their strengths and the strengths that they can create with some of their other teammates because of those moments, and whether it's defensively or whether it's opening up the floor to hit 3 point looks. I think as they continue to we keep talking about this coaching staff and Jordy Fernandez, as the players continue to acclimate themselves to one another, because I think they've done that really quickly,
Hmm.
that will continue to help them flourish in different rotations.
Exactly, and it's all about the effort and communication. In the NBA these days, the big dudes are just so athletic. It's shocking. Day'Ron, Trendon, Ben, they all can stay with these guards on switches, but it's more about covering space. Hey, I'm on the weak side guarding the corner. Am I going to rotate to the wing in time? That's kind of typically the area, generally speaking, where bigger players or, traditional centers, what have you, have a little bit more trouble. But the fact that they did it so well against Indiana in their first, time shared on the floor together
Yes.
gives you hope moving forward. And hopefully that's the norm rather than the Milwaukee game. And with that said, we're going to move to Brooklyn's finest, a player that just had a fine week that we want to shout out. Sarah, who would you like to pour some more love on as we move forward?
I feel like we've done this before, and I've done this before. So I feel like it's one of those circumstances where I keep kind of looking at different players that we are on repeat. But Cam Johnson, I think, has just
Please do.
been he's just been tremendous in so many different areas. The points obviously is one thing offensively, but I think how he continues to grow his game and just the consistency of it. And this group We can't say it enough about just in getting Dorian Finney-Smith back or getting some players back, but the veteran presence and the ability to have a level of leadership by example, I think is something that Cam Johnson brings to the table in so many different scenarios. And I think that filters into how the team plays or what the lineups look like. And so I think to me, the steady consistency of the numbers that he put up, but also the way in which he went about it for both those games jumped out to me.
Exactly. And you look at the numbers Cam Johnson is putting up, and it's not just standing in the corner shooting threes and then, attacking some closeouts if defenders fly by him. His movement and the way they run him off screens
Yes,
and dribble handoffs.
yes,
I mean, you see
yes.
it like sitting courtside, how much just pressure, and even if it doesn't end with him getting a bucket or even touching the ball, it feels, to me like that is an integral part of just the kind of spirit and the pressure Brooklyn puts on opposing defenses.
It's huge. It's huge. And that's the term we always use is gravity and
Right.
players having gravity. And he's a player that, and not to keep, but is healthy and how he's
Yep.
moving. Like just the speed of which, that's another thing that has been extremely noticeable to me, as you mentioned, like sitting there courtside watching the speed of which he's moving and attacking and putting the ball on the deck and what that looks like. And for as much as this team is trying to play at pace, I think you see that so visibly, and that's changed the dynamic of, to your point, of the balance and the spread of the offense. And so that's been a fun part for me to continue to watch. And I think there's a lot of players we can point to and some that are having a greater impact or maybe higher usage. And,
Right.
Cam Johnson being one of those, but then you have some other players that just understand the role, but I think they benefit from those type of players. And I think Cam is a huge part of that.
Yeah, and CJ's been very complimentary of Jordy Fernandez, and it's a thing that is interesting to hear, a little bit of behind the scenes for us and for fans. It's like Cam Johnson and Jordy talk about the looks
Yes.
that Cam Johnson wants. It really is
Yes.
like a mutual partnership, and obviously you have Cam Johnson, and it's like, yeah, this guy can shoot and shoot off the move, and you got to incorporate that into your offense. But he's talking about, yeah, I'm running off movement. I'm not taking as many corner threes this year because I'm above the break. I'm getting handoffs. I'm turning and firing, but I enjoy those looks. I feel like, I got a sweat going. I'm touching the ball. It's like I'm in the rhythm of the offense. And credit to both of those guys. And obviously, when I say Jordy, I'm including the whole staff and all the guys in charge of the offense and whatnot. But it's been just a maximization of his skills, which I have loved.
And it looks like, think about the fact, sorry, I've been looking for the numbers. He scored 26 points in each of the last three games he's played in. He didn't play in that Chicago game.
Hmm.
Um, but in doing so at such a high level of efficiency,
Yeah.
and to your point of the balance between how he's been moving, how he's been attacking, opening up the offense, having gravity to find teammates, all of those things have factored into the production of the offense. And I think when you do have that level, that goes back to the veteran leadership or by example of the communication with Jordy or with
Hmm.
whomever, those conversations, and you could see it on the bench, you could see it with so many different players. I feel like the amount of communication it feels like this group has is one of the major reasons why they're finding success because they care. They're talking about it. They're talking about it before the games, after the games. All of those things is evident to me that they're pouring in the type of care and concern. And it's not just, okay, I'm going to show up and do my role. They're trying to figure out how to help one another on the floor.
Exactly. Whether it's, vibes, analytics, the actual X's and O's of the offense, everyone seems to be bought in. And then just generally speaking, every time Cam Johnson shoots this season, I feel like it's going in.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
yeah, the guy just step backs. If he has his feet under him, even
yeah.
if it's contested, it's just so pure this year. And I'm enjoying watching him take all these different types of shots, step
Yes.
backs and pull ups. And listen, anytime you get to see Cam Johnson shoot the ball, that's worth the price of admission alone. Hey, and I encourage anybody that goes to Barclays Center or catches the Nets on the road, try to get there a little early, watch him warm up,
Yeah.
watch one of the best shooters in the world get to shoot, and it's always a good time. I want to shout out my Brooklyn's finest, and that would be a big man that we haven't talked about yet, but that we're certainly going to right now in Nic Claxton.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I just thought he was great. I thought the Milwaukee game was like a Nic Claxton game, if that makes sense. That's like what it looks like when he's playing at his best, when he's feeling healthy. Back injuries kept him out of a couple games this year. You don't want to mess around with that. But man, if that's the Nic Claxton the Nets are getting moving forward, and just not only we'll talk about the skills and the uniqueness of what he brings at the center position, but just the verve, the chutzpah, if you will, of how he was getting every loose ball and just getting after it. And when he's bringing that in addition to the athleticism and length and switching and all that, he is just a force for every team to deal with. And I know he had that monster 21 and 10 and 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks against Milwaukee, but against Indiana, 16 and 8, he was
Yes.
everywhere as well, hitting the offensive glass. So what did you see from him this week?
I think it's just, you said the numbers, but I also think it's him continuing, and I don't mean to keep circling back to it, but I don't think you can overlook the magnitude of what injuries do to impact not only the player themselves, but their feel for their teammates or who they're on the floor with, and vice versa. And so I think it's just the continued comfort of, how am I going to make myself available for my teammates? Where are my shots going to come from? How do I do a
Hmm.
better job? And I know it was, whether it was a couple games ago or maybe a week or two ago, that Jordi Fernandez had called him out, about the screens that he was setting and to
Yeah.
set better screens. And I feel like he continues to have a sense of purpose in figuring that out. And I think you saw that in these last two games in particular. And I also think just, you can't, the defensive end, we saw this from the time he came in as a rookie. He's got such great timing on his
Yeah.
blocks, and not even just when he's guarding, singularly guarding a player, but his help and how he's helping from behind. I think all of those things factor in. And the more he gets himself back to the level of health he wants to be at, conditioning, and then also the comfort level with his teammates, and again, just where things will come from with this group and how the offense is running, how the defense is running, I think you're going to continue to see him just flourish as well.
Hmm. And with Nick, you can tell right away, he crosses over Brook Lopez and dunks in the first couple minutes of that game against Milwaukee. Against Indiana, there's a play early on where he like tips the ball to himself and then tips it again for an offensive
The
rebound.
handles, but like
Yep.
to your point, the hand. I mean, that's, again, we've seen it, so you don't want to be like, oh, this is, you're getting familiar with it. But his ability to grab a board and push it coast to
Hmm.
coast, keep it
Hmm.
himself,
Right.
those things matter for a player of his size. Knocks that and hits a 3-point shot. Like, could that be something that you eventually start to see happen? So,
Yeah, the guy is just so talented and unique at that size, and it's why I've loved watching him, even going back to the G League 4 or 5 years ago and seeing like, hey, this dude's 6'11", and the way he handles and the fluidity of his movements are not normal. And it's just about, as it is for every player, putting it together every
yeah.
possession, over and over, like that Mike Brown press conference, over and over and over
Was that
again.
26 times, 27
Yeah,
times?
it was a lot of times. I won't do that. We got valuable time, none to spare on this show. But yes, and the offense in particular, you kind of see Brooklyn looking for him more. It feels like that's a little bit
Yes.
more of an emphasis. Like if a team switches when he sets a screen, he's sealing and they're trying to look for him. And like there was a play against the Bucks where they kind of just came down in transition and there were some cross matches, and Nic Claxton happened to have Torian Prince guarding him, and Trendon Watford or whoever had the ball at the top of the key was like, "Go post up, like go," and here's the
Yes.
ball. And Nic Claxton wheeled, and he had one of those lefty hook shots, and unassisted bucket, just creating it from thin air. It's like these skill sets are not just like a cute little kind of half micro skill that sometimes pops up. This can be like a real offensive weapon for him. It's something Jordi Fernandez talked about. The guy has like really nice touch from that little floater flip shot he has from 5, 6 feet out. He is a lot more to his offensive bag than just your average rim rolling, I can only catch lobs and dunk it center. And that's like, to me, his coolest skill. And with that, we will move on. And, Nick is always a next net to watch. I always want to see him keep adding to his game. But as for our next nets that are not Nic Claxton, I'm going to go with Keon Johnson, someone to watch for.
I like this.
Just moving forward,
I like
getting
that.
he's earned this spot in the rotation. When he was signed, to a 2-year contract this offseason. It wasn't exactly clear, what his role would be, but it was clear that the Nets wanted to reward him for a great summer and that he earned it. Now he's starting. He's getting the Damian Lillard assignment. He's getting the Tyrese Halliburton assignment. He's defending his butt off. And I'm curious just with this opportunity to see where he can keep growing from here. What do you want to see from Keon, going forward?
I think it's just the consistency possession by possession. So you
Hmm.
said all those things, which I could not agree with more of what he's doing defensively, but there's certain, and again, this is with time of just getting experience, but whether it's certain lapses or certain plays or a turnover or something that there was a couple, I would say, critical points of the Milwaukee game that you wish you could have back. And
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that's just a part of the experience and the growth. And so with
Yep.
him, though, to your point, and he is so unbelievably athletic, his ability to jump, how much he utilizes that in taking advantage with his force on the offensive side. There's so many aspects that you just love about it. And you can tell he's confident in finding a shot. And I also think for a player that is inserted in the starting lineup as he had been, but that's a scorer, that's a shooter, but also recognizing the other talent that you're playing along, how you balance that and knowing, yeah, a part of my role is to be in here to score and be aggressive
Hmm.
scoring, but it's still the good to great shots that
Yeah.
Brooklyn is looking for and making sure that you're walking that line between being conscious of that. And I think this team does a great job of that. But the more run he gets, I think you're going to continue to see that improve.
And for those that didn't watch a ton of Keon last year in Long Island, the improvement in just the decision making has been so off the charts in the last year. And I think, it's on this upward trajectory. I want to see it keep growing. I think sometimes he's so athletic, and when he gets to 2 feet, he's such a force that I almost want to see him
Yes.
take it to the rim even more, get a little stronger, go draw some fouls. I know he's getting those threes up as Jordy wants, but I think for me, the thing that not that he's not doing a good job of it, but what I want to see even more is like go use that athleticism. Let it eat a little bit in the paint. Go dunk on somebody. Um, so that's kind of what I would like to keep seeing from Keon. But again, done a great job earning these minutes.
I'm with you. I'm with you on all that.
And who would you like to? Who are you keeping an eye on as we move forward? For your next net.
I feel like we've talked about everyone quite a bit, but I was thinking Keon, but I also think just Trendon Watford and
Right.
just the moments that he has. I think he's someone we may have been through everyone in the rotation and talking
Hmm.
about the next
Hmm.
net, but I think just the more time he gets, him being back to health, what that looks like, and inconsistency. So much of this league and so much of those who perform at a high level and are valued by a team comes from consistency, how you show
Yep.
up every night and how you're able to be versatile. I know in many cases, who's playing or how they're being used is based on personnel and based on opponent and matchups, but also the ability, and I think he has that, to be versatile enough to provide optionality regardless of the opponent, regardless of the matchup, because of what he brings to the table.
Yeah, and he's always going to bring that. And then for him, it's just about executing the little things each time. So he's still staying on the court and, covering his bases. And once he does that, it's the versatility, it's posting up other guards. That's all the stuff, the extra stuff that he can bring.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've talked about every net and deservedly so on this episode, even though they played just 2 games this past week, which means it is time for trivia. Uh, the Nets PR staff, great with the stats. Shout out to Eli Pearlstein, the man, was tweeting about the Nets had 3 20-point scores already for the third time this season against the Bucks. It was Dennis Schroeder, who, by the way, was awesome in that game. We
Yes.
have hardly talked about him. Could not miss, and I was listening to the Bucks broadcast on the rewatch, inciting a lot of fear in them. But it was Dennis, Clax, and Cam Johnson. And the Nets have had 3 20-point scores now 3 times this season. They're on pace to far exceed their mark, the amount of times they did that last season. So I want to ask you, what trio of Nets has scored 20 points in a game the most times in franchise history?
So a trio
That has
that
all
has
scored
all
20
scored
points
20 in the same game
in the same game
in history.
in Nets history.
This is all time.
This is all time.
I've
I don't
got
want.
two guesses.
Okay.
Uh,
Don't overthink it.
Well, I mean, a part of me wants to just say J. Kidd, Richard Jefferson, and Vince Carter.
Correct. However, they are tied.
Oh no.
No. That counts. They're tied. I was researching this. I think it's great. They are tied with another net from that era where it's Carter, Jefferson, and another net kind of from that era of
Kenyon Martin.
basketball. No, Nenad Kristic.
Oh.
So Kidd, Carter, Jefferson, classic trio of Nets, the Nets I grew up falling in love
Oh,
with. They did that 8 times. But so
Okay.
did Vince Carter, RJ, and Nenad Kristic, who I thought it'd be a great time to give him a shout
That's a
out.
great heads up. I was gonna say, and I knew they didn't play long enough together. My other like secondary would have been Harden, Kyrie, and KD, but
Yeah,
I
no, they
don't
just
think they had
didn't
enough run together.
didn't get enough
Um,
run. But yeah, I figured you'd get that
that's a
one.
good
Yeah,
one. That's a
that
good
was a good
one. I
one.
like that. I like that.
And with that, with Sarah splitting the pair of free throws, but making the most important one. We were up 3. Sarah hit the first one to put us up 4. Great
You came
clutch
through. You
performance.
came through.
We came
Yes.
through. We won the game. And with that concludes episode 8 of the Backcourt. Thank you so much for listening from Sarah and I. You can like, subscribe, rate the podcasts, whatever you got on your platform. We'd really appreciate it. And this has been episode 8 of the Backcourt, presented by Ticketmaster. Thank you guys all for listening.